One of the curious things about the number of times students are marked going up is how little of it we actually need, for several reasons. There's a fascinating study in Australia where they asked students in the middle of their first year to predict what degree classification they were going to get at the end, and they were almost all right. It would save a lot of time, wouldn't it? You just ask. Because they already know. But you wonder what the added value is there. But then there's another study. I was running a workshop at Portsmouth Poly, as it was then, and it was a science faculty. And I'd been running workshops on teaching large classes, but they were cutting straight to the action. They called it saving staff time. And one of the guys there, before I turned up, and without talking to me, he was worried about the assessment volume, and he produced a spreadsheet, and every row on the spreadsheet was a student on the science program, about 80 students at that time, and every column was an occasion in which students did something that was marked where the mark eventually contributed to a module and the module to the degree. So column 17 might have been lab report 3 on module 6 or something like that. And there'd be a mark there, and then you add them all up, and then over there they produce a degree classification. And this guy did a thing called a discriminant function analysis. What that does is look at which of the columns, in other words the assessments, contribute least to the degree classification at the other end. So you could analyse the entire spreadsheet and see which column is contributing least to discriminating between students. And you find out what it would be, and it might have been column 17, that lab report in that module. So you cross that data off, and you see if it makes any difference to students getting a degree classification, and you discover that it doesn't. So he did the analysis again and identified the next column that contributed least, and he crossed that off. Now there were 116 columns on this spreadsheet, so in students' experience in that science program, students were marked 116 times. By the time he got down to the very first column that he threw away, an assessment he threw away, that made a difference to a single student in terms of which degree classification they got, there were only 6 columns left. So 110 of the 116 were completely redundant in terms of producing students' degree classifications. Now, that seems fairly extreme to me, but Noel Entwistle at Edinburgh said he's done exactly the same analysis on several degree programmes and found the same thing. That you might in some cases be talking as little as 5% of current marking to produce a degree classification. And oddly, I mean, at Oxford, some students are assessed 10 times in 3 years. That's it. That's all that happens. All the rest is formative. Now, again, I'm not suggesting you copy Oxford, but there are people who take that issue seriously. And they say, Oxford would say there's no point in putting a mark on something in the first year, for example, because they're nothing like degree standard yet. What would it mean? There's only any point in putting a mark on something at the end of 3 years when you can see how good they finally got. So they actually have rationales for not doing summative assessment until students are actually able to do things well. Up until then, it's just learning how to do them well. The last thing, there's a centre in Oxford that's run by a guy who used to be number 2 at the Education Funding Council, Barbara McCracken. And he is a kind of outsourced place where anybody who wants data about things that concern about higher education is sent to organise surveys or data collection or reviews and things like that. And they've been doing very large-scale surveys of what students spend their time on. It's got covered in the press repeatedly about how many hours of class contact they get. But the bit that fascinates me most in that is how many hours a week students work all together, in class and out of class. And there are subject areas nationally, media studies is one of them, where the average total student weekly effort is below that as defined as a part-time student. In other words, below 20 hours a week. So they're supposed to be doing, because your semesters are quite short nowadays, and you're meant to be reaching the Bologna standard of 1,500 to 1,800 hours a year. Your students would need to work over 50 hours a week to meet the Bologna standard, what a degree is. They're actually working under 20 in some subject areas. There are whole institutions where the average is only just over 20. Now, this is slightly worrying. But one of the best predictors of how much students learn is how much time they spend on it. It's the time on task principle. And students are not spending much time on their studies. And this is despite the fact that we've got far more marking than we used to. Now, if you ask teachers, they say, you have to mark it because otherwise students wouldn't do it. Well, the truth is they're not doing it anyway. Even when you do mark it, you need a different strategy to get students to put the time in, because you are already working as hard as you can possibly work. You can't mark any more stuff just to grab more student time. It's impossible. It's not a strategy that's workable. You need a different strategy to grab student time and effort other than marking more things. Marking more things doesn't help you. It doesn't contribute to degree classifications. It doesn't even capture enough of their time. The UK, England in particular, is at the bottom of the European League table in terms of how hard students work. And that's a pretty alarming thing to realize. Given that we're supposed to have smaller classes, more traditional teaching methods with close contact, things that we assume don't go enough. Despite that, our students are not putting the time in. Doesn't work.